Hello, welcome to this C# tutorial from MoICT. In this tutorial, we're going to be remaking the T-Rex Endless Runner game using Windows Form and C#. So what I've done here is I've recreated the game that I've done before on the channel. You can find the link in the description, or you can find it on the channel page as well. What I've done here is I've added more obstacles and a few more game elements to the game itself that make the game a lot better than what we had before. There's also sound effects and so on to make the game a bit more immersive. I'm just going to play the demo here. You can see that there's a scrolling background. There's a custom font that we're using as well. And if I just restart the game here, just move the mouse cursor away. I can press up button to jump, down to crouch, and the score is keeping, and you can hear the sound is playing. And if I hit an obstacle, it also makes a sound that tells the user that the game has ended, and then you can press enter to restart again. Okay, so after a certain amount of score, the obstacle will switch to the pterodactyl, so which will be flying towards the player. So now you can see the pterodactyl is flying, and then I need to crouch down to avoid it or jump above it. Okay, and if I get hit by the pterodactyl, the game also ends. Okay, so there's a parallax scrolling background effect that's going on here. We're going to be using the Windows Form paint element to recreate that and load everything from scratch. And we'll be creating this one using Windows Forms application using C# programming. Let's go ahead and start a new project in Visual Studio. Okay, so before we get started, make sure to download the game assets that you're going to need. We have the background image. We have the background image, the obstacles, the T-Rex hit image, T-Rex crouching down running image, T-Rex normal running, the pterodactyl flying, and then we also have the font and the two sound effects that we're going to be adding to the game as well. You can find all of these game assets in the Patreon, so you should be able to join for free and then download it from the post relating to this video. You can find the link in the description. Hopefully that helps. Okay, so to start, we're just gonna click on create a new project. I will choose my Windows Forms app. If you can't find it on your recently used projects, you can simply type in Windows here. And then you should be able to find the Windows Form app .NET Windows. Now you'll notice that there's a .NET Framework one as well, but we're going to be using the .NET one instead. Click next, and then let's name this one T-Rex, and let's run a game, more ICT. Okay, I'm saving mine in my C drive, but you can save it wherever you want, but make sure that you know the location of the project. Click next. So at the moment, I've updated my Visual Studio so it supports up to .NET 8. You can choose any one of them. That's the last one available on your list. It could be something newer or could be older. We're using pretty much all ground level .NET support stuff, so nothing's going to be out of ordinary here. So once you're done, click create. Okay, now that Windows Form has loaded our project, we should be able to make some changes to the form. The first thing I want to do is I want to change the form size. So if you go to the properties window over here, and then I should be able to change the size of the form to 880 by 480. Okay, so it's slightly longer. And then we're just going to change the title of the form to say T-Rex and Endless Runner dash more ICT. Okay, so that's just the title of the game there. Okay, so now let's go find the toolbox. So my toolbox is on the left here. I should be able to drag and drop anything. So if your toolbox isn't here, you can easily find it in the view and then just click on toolbox, and then it should be able to appear. Okay, so a couple of things we're going to need. First, we're going to need a label. I'm just going to place a label here for now. It's fine if it's label 1. We can change that in the code afterwards. Okay, and then we're going to need a couple of things, like we're going to need a picture box first. So this could be the ground. So I'm going to change this one's height to 50. So I think it's already 50 by default. I'm just going to leave it exactly as it is. Place it over there and stretch it out to the width of the form. So that's where our player is going to basically land, right? And we don't need to put any images or anything like that on there. So because we just need it to be transparent for now. Okay, so we're going to basically change the back color of this one from control to transparent. So go to web. So inside the back color option in the properties, just go to web here and then change that to transparent. So that way anything that's in the background will be basically inheriting it through the picture box without needing to block out the picture box or anything like that. Okay, and then we're going to need a couple of picture boxes for our T-Rex and the obstacles. So first one is our T-Rex. Okay, first thing I want to do is go to choose image. Under the project resources file, I want to import everything from there. Okay, so once you navigated to your folder where you downloaded and extracted the files, you can find all the pictures in that folder. You can highlight every single one of them and then click open. Okay, that will add all these pictures to the resources of the project, right? And I just need to find the Dino Run one and then click OK. Once that happens, now I need to set this one size to auto size. So the dino is normally sized. Okay, so the location we're going to set this one to is going to be 217, 217, and then 312. Maybe move the ground down a little bit more. Okay, so the ground is just a guide for us at this point. Okay, so we have our dinosaur. Now let's add some obstacles. Okay, we'll add 3 obstacles, but we can copy and paste them afterwards. Let's go and right click on this one. Choose click on choose image, and then click on cactus one. So just a single cactus. Right, I'm going to set this one to stretch image, and then we can resize this image as we need to. Okay, so maybe a bit down egg. Stretch it out a little bit more. But we don't want to make it too big so it's difficult for the player to jump over it. Okay, so as long as it's slightly manageable, that's okay. But remember, you can always change the size of them afterwards once you've done some of them before. So you can change, but remember, you can always change the size of them later on as you are playtesting the game. Okay, so I'm going to click on this one, Control C and Control V to paste a copy of it. Okay, I'm going to right click and go to choose image again. Project resources, choose cactus number 2. This one is slightly wider. Okay, same height, a little bit wider, so the player will have to jump accordingly whenever it comes towards them. So that's the second one. I'm going to Control C, Control V again, and this one's going to be our pterodactyl. So call it flying. Okay, so the flying one's there. We make that one slightly smaller. It's going to be flying on 2 different locations, right? So it's going to be flying on the top and on the bottom as well. Okay, so for our 3 obstacles, I'm going to hold shift and select all 3 of them. And then I will go to the tag. So there's a tag option here. right? And then I can simply type in obstacle. Okay, so you can see the tag option that's called obstacle there. Okay, now we need to select the player one. So player one's name at the moment is called picture box 2, right? So what I want to do is I want to change the picture box 2 name to T-Rex. That way it's easier to manage it afterwards. Okay, so we don't have to make any more changes to the form. We need one more element, which is going to be the timer. So we drag and drop a timer to the screen here. Let's set the interval to 15. Okay, and we'll actually change the enable to true. So when the form loads, the timer starts running on its own. Okay. All right, so that's all we need, I think, at the moment. We got a T-Rex, obstacles, and then we can change the size around afterwards. Now the next thing to do is to add the events. So when you click on the form, just the blank part of the form here, you'll see that there's a little lightning bolt icon here called events. Okay, so while the form is still selected, I'm going to click on the events one here at the moment. Okay, and then inside of there, you'll find a couple of events that we actually need. So we need the key down. Okay, so we need key down, and we're going to type that in as key is down. Like so. And when I press enter, it basically takes me to the C# script at the moment, right? So the C# script will open next to your designer. That will add that event to the form, and it actually tells us that it's got one reference at the moment that's linked to the form. Okay, and let's do the same for key is up. Okay, so now that's added it to the form as well. Now we also need one more, and that's going to be the paint. Okay, so the paint one is actually quite important because we're going to be painting and drawing the images from the background image that we have onto the form, so then it can animate. So I'm going to call this one form paint event. Okay, and then that will take us to the C# script again. So right now we have 3 events. We have key is down, key is up, form paint event. We also need one more for our timer. So I'm going to change the timer's name first to game timer. Okay, so it becomes a bit more contextualized to the game itself. Go to the events, and then in here we can type in game timer event like so, and then press enter, and that will take us to the script again. Okay, so we have our 4 events, right? So 3 of these are linked to the form, and 1 is linked to the game timer. Okay, now we're going to write some of our customized functions that we're going to need to use to make this game work. I'm just going to make some space in the bottom. Yeah. Okay. So one of the things to remember is that your C# script here, the .cs file, right? If you notice here, right, the .cs file. This is basically like a text file, really. So it's only being styled as a programming file inside of Visual Studio. So you can pretty much use use Visual Studio Code to open this one. You can pretty much use Notepad to open this one if you want to. Okay, so to add spaces in the bottom, it's basically just going in and pressing enter and adding the spaces that you need. Okay, so now let's write our custom functions here. So first one is going to be private void called game setup. Okay. Second one we can do with private void called reset. Just until it meta says readable. Okay, and then we can do another one called private void move backgrounds. Okay, so that's going to be responsible for moving the background image on the form. And then we'll do another one, private void, move obstacles. All right, so here we have our events. So we got our keys down, keys up, form paint, game timer, game setup, game reset, move backgrounds, and move obstacles. Okay. I'm just going to minimize these so when the text gets slightly longer, it'll be still easier to see on the screen because the code is quite zoomed in at the moment. So right at the top here where you see the namespace, so that's the namespace of our project. So that's the name of our project at the moment, and everything that we're doing is inside of that. Now to use any other libraries that we actually might need from C#, such as to use custom fonts or to play say for example play sound, right? We need to use media, we need to use drawing and text, so we can import these in here. Okay, so the first one is the drawing 2D, right? So this one here we're going to be using to help us draw the 2D images that we have for the background. Second one is for the text, where we can use load custom fonts. And third one is the media one that's going to be used to play the sound effects that we need. Okay, so before we go any further, I think it's time to import our sound effects and the font file. So if you go back to your Solutions Explorer here, so I've hidden mine to make see the code better. But for now, let's go back to our Solutions Explorer, and you should be able to see something that appears called resources.resx. That's your resources file for this project, right? And then all the resources that we've imported so far are inside of the resources folder, right? So if you just double click on that one, you can see all the resources are starting to appear here. So we can actually import our sound effects to this one as well. If I go back here and then first select the hit.wav file and then control click on the second WAV file there, right? And then I can drag and drop that into the resources folder. Okay, so that way it gets embedded into the exe file that gets created into the debug folder. And I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, and second thing that we need to do is we need to add a folder here. So I'm going to minimize these for now. Okay, so I'm just going to right click on this part here first. So where the name of the project is, not the first one, the second one here. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and say add new folder. Let's call this one font, right? And then inside of the font folder here, we're going to need to add our font file. So I have a font called Pixel, right? So I can just drag and drop that into the Explorer. One second, I need to pin that first. It gets hidden away. And then I can drag and drop that inside of the font here. Okay, so now what this is going to do is once we actually debug the file, right? So when we run the project, for example, I want this folder to be created inside of the debug folder, so then this font can be found, right? So it needs to stay linked as a content for this project. So if I right click on this one, say properties, right? And then at the moment it says build action nothing, and then it says copy to output directory is do not copy. So we need to change that to say content. So build action is a content, and then I want it to always copy this file to the output directory. Okay, so make these two changes to the font file, which is the pixel.ttf. Okay, so if I show you this in action at the moment, so if I just run this project, for example, so anything in the resources file there gets to the exe file. So right now you can see these animating and so on, right? Okay, so now that we built the project, I can right click on the name of the project file again, right? And then go click on open file in File Explorer. Okay, and here I can go to the bin folder, debug, and net Windows, right? And then you'll see this is where all your files are. So right now you have an exe file that I can double click on, and it will independently open the game that we are working on at the moment, right? And you'll notice that there's a font folder here and the pixel.ttf file that gets copied into there as well. Okay, so now that we've added our font and added the two WAV files as well, right? Let's go back to the code. So I'm going to hide my Solutions Explorer again, and then I shall go back to the C# code part. Okay, so with our namespace and everything done, let's add our variables. The variables are going to get added here, so right above the public form1. So this is our main constructor. So this one here is going to initialize all the components inside. So initialize component function is actually built into another class here that's basically running to make sure your buttons, picture boxes, any other things like labels, or even the form itself gets loaded up properly. So make sure do not delete or comment these lines out. Okay, so we can add everything inside of this one just above this line, so it's still inside of the class that then can be used in any other function. So if we declare the variables over here somewhere, it's not going to work because then it's outside the scope of the class. So we need to make sure that it stays inside of the scope. Okay, so let's start with the variables. Okay, so first we are importing two images for background image and background image 2. So it's going to be the same image that we're going to be using to create the parallax scrolling, right? And then you got your background height, background width, height, X, Y, and then background 2X as well, right? So because the Y position is going to be the same for both, so we just don't need to create a background PG2 position Y as well. And then we have the character speed. So it's the speed of the obstacles coming towards the player. The form width, we need to put it into an integer, so then it's easier to calculate. The attack timer and attack timer R is going to be used to basically show, so whenever we need to use the cactuses to move towards the player, we're going to use that. And then when a certain amount is reached, then we can move it to the pterodactyl flying towards the player, so then the player can run normally, jump, or crouch down. Okay, and then you have the score and the speed. So the speed score is for the player, how many obstacles they have jumped over. Then you have the speed, which is what the speed of the player is to jump and then move down as well. So this is the current positions that we're going to be using for the flying effect. And these are just rudimentary numbers at the moment. We're going to try to run the game with the obstacles and see if we need to change anything. Right, so this part here is going to be for when the pterodactyls are flying low, and then this part here is when the pterodactyls flying is slightly higher, so the player will have to crouch down to avoid it, and you can't jump over it, kind of thing. Okay. The reason I'm using the same numbers twice there is because we're going to use we're going to randomly select any of these numbers from there. So having four of them helps so to differentiate the numbers that get selected. So if you have only two, a lot of times the same position would be selected because there's only two values available. If you have four, then a lot of times it's differentiated, so you could move up, down, kind of thing. So here I have 4 booleans for the game. So first one is for the jumping, so whether the player is jumping or not. Second one is for the change animation. So the reason we need this one is because when you're holding the key down and the GIF needs to play from start frame to the end and then start again. What a lot of times happen is that when it gets to the end frame, it will stop there because the down key is still pressed down, right? So we need to create a switch where basically we want to keep the GIF playing indefinitely until the key is released, right? So this is why I'm using the change anim boolean. I've used this technique in several other tutorials as well on the channel, but I've decided to use this one because this was a problem anytime I pressed and held down, because the GIF is like a very short playing GIF. So it looked like after a certain amount of running, the dinosaur was just sliding across the floor. And then you also have the flying attack boolean. So this is where the flying attack should happen or not. And then last one is the game over one. Okay, so here we need to generate a random number. So I'm basically creating a new instance of the random class and then creating and calling the constructor for it. Then here I'm creating a new list for the obstacles, where we're going to save all the obstacles inside of this list. So then it becomes easier for us to hit or to check for hits against the player. I'm also creating a hitbox, right? And this hitbox, the reason I'm creating this hitbox is because if you notice the dinosaur, it has a lot of empty spaces, right? So if this picture box here sort of hits there, it will um, calculate that as a hit because of the rectangle, right? So we're going to create a hitbox that's slightly smaller, so it sort of covers this area here, right? So then the obstacle will have to come closer to the dinosaur's body to actually register a hit. Okay, that's why we're creating a separate hitbox picture box here. And then the private font collection, new font, and it's basically a class, allows us to use custom fonts into our application. These two are the sound player. So I'm calling the sound player class. We're not instantiating anything at the moment because we need to reference the sound that we're going to use later on. So instead of doing it there, we'll do it slightly later on. So then before we play the sound, we can just reference which sound we want to play and so on. Okay, so the hit sound is when you actually hit an obstacle, and a +1 sound is when you've successfully jumped over an obstacle and you scored 1 from there. Okay, so now inside of the form 1 constructor here, I'm just going to press enter once, and then we can add references to the game setup in the reset. Another thing we need to do is, because there's only 3 obstacles here, so I'm just going to right click on there and go to the properties window, and let's change these names here so we can add them to the list easier. Okay, so go to properties. I'm just going to pin that here so it's easier to see. So in the name for each of the obstacle, I'm going to call this one obstacle 1. Okay, and then call this one obstacle 2, and then this one can be obstacle 3. Okay, so if I zoom in a little bit here, you should be able to see it. Okay, so I've changed the name here to obstacle 1, and then for the other ones I've changed it to obstacle 2 and then obstacle 3. So it's just the name that I'm changing, so then we can use that name to reference it in the code to add it to the list. Okay, and then we're going to do that now inside of the game setup function. So we have quite a few bits to set up first. Okay, so here we have our main setup for the background images. So I'm setting up the background width to 900 and then background height to 450. And then the position for the second background is going to be 900. So the first background will start at 0 to 900 and the second one is going to start at 900. Okay, and both of them will have the exact same image. I'm setting up the forms option for the double buffer to true because we're going to need that. So the when the images are moving, it's not glitching on the screen. And we also want to set it to optimize double buffer, so it actually uses some of the controls from the GPU to actually push a little bit of a smooth animation on the screen, right? The form width basically just saving the width of the form on here, and then we're giving the form a background color of black, and then the three obstacles that we named just now are being added to the obstacles list. Okay, second bit is going to be for the font, right? So let's do the font very quickly. Okay, so one of the reasons the LBL score is coming up as red is because we haven't changed the name of the font, name of the label just yet. So we'll do that in a minute. So first of all, we saying new font. So we're referencing the class that we created here, right? So the reference to the new instance of the class called new font, right? So we're saying this is where our font and then the pixel font that we're going to be including here. And then the new font is gonna basically new font families. We're going with the very first option there, setting it to a size of 30 and then adding a bold to the font as well. The fore color for the font is going to be white, back color will be transparent, and the text should just say score 0. Okay, and now let's go back to properties here and then change that to label score. And then LBL score. Okay, so I'm just setting it up here. Okay, so inside on the label, let's go to LBL and then score with the capital S. Okay, that should get rid of these red lines from here. Okay, so the next bit we need to do is just set up the hitbox. Okay, so at the moment we have our hitbox here. So I'm going to set the back color to red just to demonstrate where the hitbox is going to be placed. And then hitbox's width is going to be half a width of the T-Rex. Hitbox's height is going to be the same height as the T-Rex minus 10 pixels, right? And then we're going to add it to the form, right? And we're also going to bring it front. So we'll comment that out later on. And then initially we'll set the game over to false when the game actually runs. And the attack R is going to be set between 12 and 20. So that's going to be the range of the attack that's going to happen between the obstacles coming towards the player and so on. Okay, so with the game, so this is our game setup function fully at the moment. So it's just setting up everything that needs to be set up, right? So at the moment, if I just run this one, okay, so you can see that this is our hitbox at the moment. So because it's not inside the timer just yet, so when we run the timer it should just stay attached to the T-Rex. So basically this is our hitbox, right? I'm going to set this to transparent for now. I just want to see the font changing first. Okay, so if we set it to transparent, we can't really see it anymore, right? But that's perfectly fine. It's because it's on top of the text. That's why it's rest of it's not showing up. So we can also set it to the um, location of the hitbox to the actual T-Rex. But we need to do that inside of the timer, where it will basically keep track of the location of the T-Rex, and then when you're moving up, the hitbox will move up with you as well. Okay, and then bring it to front. Set the false for now. So we'll just comment this line out. Okay, so now you can see the score, it has changed to the custom font that we've used, right? So if I change the score text here somewhere, yeah, to say 100 or 1000, right, it will change like this. Okay, and the good thing about having the transparent images using the form is that they actually starts to inherit the background from the form automatically. Okay, so I'll change that back to 0. Okay, let's hide that for now. Let's start doing some long lines. Okay, let's do the game reset, where we can start by basically just setting up everything for the T-Rex and the obstacles where they're going to be placed and so on. Okay, so in the game reset function, first of all, we're just resetting the dyno to go back to the run animation, setting up the top to 313, right? And then the 3 obstacles are being set randomly using their original locations, right? So it could be obstacle 1 is just getting the form width, and then it's being set to 100, between 100 and 200 pixels. The second one is getting the left location from the first one, and then it's getting set to about 600 to 800 position, and then third one, which is the flying pterodactyl, and then that's going to be set to between 200 and 200 locations. So we can change these numbers around afterwards and see what fits. So for now, we're just going to leave it as it is. Okay, and then we're also going to start the game timer. So this is if, say for example, we already played the game and we stopped the game because we hit another object. So we can start the game timer at the moment, reset the score, attack timer, speed, set game over to false, change animation to false, jumping to false, and then set the character speed back to 12. Okay, so to start adding the backgrounds, I think we'll do the background first before we move on. So to start in the backgrounds, if I go to the form paint event, so that's the one that's going to be drawing the background image, the both background images, and then we're going to use the move backgrounds function, right, alongside with the game timer tick. That's basically going to move the backgrounds smoothly across towards the left of the screen. Okay, so to start off with that first. Okay, so we have in the beginning we have our first canvas. So basically we're creating a new instance of the graphics class here, or let's call it canvas, right? And then we catching the event from there, and then we get in the graphics part of the event, and we're linking these together, so that way we can actually use the canvas to draw the two images that we need. So the first image we're drawing is the background image, right? And then we're giving it the position, background position X, position Y, width, and then height. And then second one is the second image, obviously, and then we're giving it the background to position X, which is going to be the 900 pixels after the first one, and then same position Y as that one, same width and same height. These two here, these two options, the smoothing mode and interpolation mode, right? So there's basically to make sure the images are drawn in higher quality, and when they're moving around, you can still sort of see the smoothness in the movement. That's all they're doing. Okay, so when we actually refreshing the canvas, and then it's getting redrawn, so it's not basically choppy or it's not glitchy. Okay, and inside of the game timer, we basically need to say move backgrounds here. So with the move backgrounds, and we'll also do this invalidate. Okay, so we'll use these two. So inside of the game timer event, right? So it's using the move backgrounds, and this to invalidate is basically going to erase everything and force the form to redraw again. Okay, and the rest of the code can go underneath that, but we'll need to use these two in order to display the background moving on the screen. Okay, let's go to the move backgrounds function. So first we're basically going to subtract one from each of the X position for the background. So it's going to move one position towards the left for both of the backgrounds, right? So we want it to be uniform as much as possible. Okay, so the second bit is if the background position X is less than the background width, right? Minus background width, which means if it's gone to minus 900, so this is our first background, then we're going to position that background to end of the second background. So that way, so the first background's position is going to be right in the end of the second background, right? So, and then what that will do is then that will continuously be moving one after the other. And we need to do the same thing for the second background as well. Okay, so as you can see, it's basically just doing the exact same thing for background position X and background to position X as well. Okay, I think we can try it out now. Just double check. So, okay, so at the moment you can see the background moving. Right. Okay, so it's not. So you can see right now I've made it full screen. So you'll see that once this one has moved to the end, then the other one, once the other one has reached the end of their end of the line there, right? You would basically just switch back to here. So that way the screen is never left empty, right? So it's always filling it in the next. So it's basically showing a parallax scrolling for us. Okay, another problem we need to solve is the transparency for these. So I'm going to highlight, we'll highlight all of them. Right click, go to properties, and then go to back color. Instead of saying having control, I'm just going to set it to transparent. So that way they will all then be transparent towards the card. Okay, so now as you can see, it looks perfectly in place and it's not choppy, it's quite smooth. So it's running quite nicely at the moment. There's no interaction with the keys, but we can add that now. So far, so good. So we've done up to there. Now we can do the key down and key up. Okay, so if the game is not over, so if the game is still running at that point, we want to jump up and we haven't jumped yet. So there's not currently jumping, then we can change the jumping boolean to true. So this is the e dot key code equals keys up. So this is when we press the key up key, right? And then if we press the down key and we're not jumping, right? So basically, and jumping is false. So because we need to be on the floor when we press the down key, right? And then at this point, we need to use our change animation boolean. So if the change animation boolean is false, we're gonna basically change it down to the dinosaur crouching down and then set that to true. So that way that works as a switch. So then that can continuously play as long as this is true, right? And then if this is true, then we're going to set the T-Rex's top to 352. Right, okay, so let's see this action first to make sure the numbers are working. So see if I press it down, if I press and hold it, the animation is still happening, right? Okay, because the jumping animation doesn't work at the moment because the jumping, we need to add it to our timer, right? And then we'll do the keys up where we actually reset the dinosaur back, and we also need to put the game over bit as well. Okay, so let's go to the keys up. Okay, so at this point, if the key is down, sorry, the down key is released, right? So we held it down and then we released it, and the game is still running. Then we're going to reset it back to the dino run, and then the top is going to be reset to 315 at this point, and we're going to set the change anim to false. Right, so that's just resetting the image and the location of the T-Rex image. And right after that, we're basically going to say if the enter key is pressed and the game over is true at this point, then we're going to run the reset function. So the say we hit an obstacle and the game's over, we're going to reset and play again. We can just press enter and play that game. Okay, so if I run this at the moment, we see T-Rex switching back. Okay, so you can see that crouching animation is now working. So I think first we'll go to our timer event, and then let's add the bits that we need for the jumping and so on. But before that, I want to show you how the hitbox actually works as well. So what we'll do is we'll add these first, and then we can work on the jumping. Okay, so here we are running the move obstacles function, right? Same as we done the move backgrounds function there. Move obstacles function will basically keep track of which obstacles moving where, and then what the score is, and to play the sound and so on and so forth. And then we are updating the score label, right? So LBL score dot text and then score semicolon, and then make sure there's a space there, otherwise the score and the text is going to be squashed together. Okay, and right here we are basically telling the timer where the hitbox is going to be, right? So we are setting it up so it's slightly in the middle of the T-Rex, right? So the T-Rex right minus hitbox width plus 20, and then hitbox top is that, and then plus 5, so it's slightly down on the thingy. So from the T-Rex's top. So if I go to game setup here somewhere, and then I change that to red. Okay, and let me just bring that back to front again, so then we can see where the hitbox is going to be. Okay. So if you notice that this is where T-Rex is running at the moment, and then this is where we want the objects to hit there, particularly to for the game to be over, right? So if the obstacle is here and then we jump up, then we can successfully jump over it, no problem. But if we hit that particular red zone, then the game is over. Okay. I'm gonna move that back to transparent. So we can leave that for with the red for now, and then we can move that back when we actually added some of the bits, because I want to see what it looks like when we actually jump up and down as well. Okay, let's do the jumping part for T-Rex. Okay, for this part, we're saying there's a big if statement saying if we're jumping, right? So if we pressed up and then jump boolean is false at that point, then we're going to reduce the speed of the top position for the T-Rex according to the speed, which is set to 10. So it's going to move up, and then when it hits about say 150, right? Then if the top is less than 150, then we're going to reverse the speed to move down. And when it goes below, when it goes greater than 312, so you moved down to the screen, and then at that point we're going to reset the T-Rex back to 313, set the jumping to false, and then reset the speed back to 10. Okay, so at this point we can check. So if I move up, so as you can see, the box is moving with the T-Rex, right? So that's because it's happening inside of the timer and is keeping track of where the T-Rex is and then moving it accordingly. So that way we actually have a nice little area where we can determine whether it hits another object. Okay, we'll do the hit afterwards. So just leave a note here to say I'll do the collision testing here later on. And I think for now we can start moving the obstacles. And then last thing to do is going to be to check the collision detection. Okay, so in the beginning of the move obstacle function, we're just referencing the +1 sound with the new sound player, and then we allowing to know where the which sound file we want it to play. In this case, we have a sound file called +1 inside of the resources that we included earlier, right? And we're just giving it the location. So when we want to play this sound, it knows exactly which one to play. And the reason we're doing it before anything else is because this sound is going to be playing for all 3 obstacles. So instead of referencing it each time, we're referencing it once, and then we can just run the play function afterwards. Okay, so if the flying attack boolean is false, right? So because we don't want all 3 of the obstacles to go together to the player, because that would be a difficult play. So we want to make sure that the cactuses first are going in, so the 2 cactuses are going to go going in separately, so there's room for the player to jump, right? So in this case we are moving both cactuses together towards the player, right, if the flying attack is false. And if it's true, then we don't want to move these 2, we just want to move the obstacle 3, which is the flying pterodactyl, right? So on that one we can now set up the attack timer. Okay, so if the attack timer becomes is the same as the attack R, the random number that we have selected for the one that we have in generated, right? Then we're gonna set the flying attack boolean to true, so that at that point you know exactly what the the pterodactyl is going to come into play at that point. So the reason we're doing it this way is so the player can't anticipate exactly when the flying attacks are going to start and when it's going to stop and so on, right? And then once the attack timer goes back to 0, then the flying attack is going to be set to false. So while the cactuses are running, we're going to add, so we're going to basically add to the attack timer, right? So if it's same as exactly the attack or whatever number that is, then we're going to set that up. And then when the flying one is happening, we're going to reduce the attack timer. And then when it goes to 0, then basically that's going to be false and the cactus are going to be back into play. Okay, so obstacle 1 and 2 are the cactuses. So if it goes, say, minus 100, so from the form, it goes to minus 100. So it's gone past the left side of the screen. So we know the player has successfully jumped over it. Then we're going to reset the value of that one, right? So he's going to go and find where the obstacle 2 is and plus the form width, and it's going to move slightly on the random location of 100 and between 100 and 300. We're going to add one to the attack timer, add one to the score, play the sound, right? And then we're going to do exactly the same thing for obstacle 2. So if it's gone past the left-hand screen, right, then we know it's successfully been avoided. Then we'll find the obstacle 1 position, form width, and then the same random number for this one as well. And then +1 for the attack timer, and then score and play the sound as well. So once obstacle 3 has reached minus 100, at this point we can basically say that it's going to move back to the form width, and then we'll also give it a 3 to 400 range to be randomized on the left position. And then on the top position, we're going to want to basically pick a flying position. So the array that we created earlier with the 4 values inside, we're just going to randomly pick one from there. And then we'll reduce one from the attack timer. And then once it's done that, it's just going to add one to the score and play the +1 sound. Okay, so that's pretty much all we need really at this point. Last thing is the collision, but let's test it and see what it actually does at this point. So if the obstacles are going, you can see the obstacles going by quite fast. So there you see the pterodactyls going through. Okay. And it's picking any of the random locations from there. Okay, it's gone back to the obstacles again. Okay, so the obstacles are great. It's fine. It's gone back to flying again. Yeah, I think that works. That's working quite well. A couple of things I would change probably is so that's for the top. and that's for the bottom. So 279. So 279 seems kind of high. Let me just try and see. So 363, 279 moved over here. 275, 80 maybe. About 290. I think 290 is probably a better number there instead of that one. So 290, 290, and then 350 doesn't work very well either. So if I want it to be slightly on the floor there, it needs to be about 363. Okay, so 363. Okay. Because the hitbox is slightly down from the head, right? So I don't want the player to just run and completely avoid the flying obstacle. So that's why I'm just changing some of the numbers around. Because this is what we do. We just test things and then see what works, what doesn't, and then you can just work out exactly where we want to go from there. Random, so change that maybe to 200 to 400, maybe instead of 200 and 200. We just left that one as it is before. Let me just try it out. Let's jump over these ones, the mouse a little bit. This time only goes to 12, 13, and then once it hits 13, that's when this one comes in. Okay, selecting all the bottom ones and the top. Okay. I think once we get the hit test working, we should be able to work out the numbers quite nicely. Okay, then so the last bit of the last bit for this game is going to be for the collision testing. So the collision testing can go right under here. Right. So at the moment we have a for each loop. So the for each loop is going to loop through every single object, picture box object that's available inside the obstacles list. So we only have 3. So we're going to say x.bounds.intersect with hitbox.bounds. So basically if the x, y, height and width is matching with the other one, or if it's overlapping at one point, then the remaining of the instructions will be executed. So first we want to stop the timer. Then we want to show the T-Rex dead image, so it's with the eyes bigger. Set the game over boolean to true. Reference the hit sound to the location of the sound. Play the hit sound and then reset the T-Rex's location to 313. Right, so that way the T-Rex isn't like, on the hovering over the ground, or is under on the floor or something like that, under the floor or anything like that, right? So at this point, let's test this out and see if this actually works. So this needs to be inside of the game timer event. Okay, so right now I hit that and then the game stops. I press enter, it restarts again. So now if I jump on top of them, right, then obviously it ends as well. Okay, so then that ended 2. So to survive enough to get to the pterodactyl. Okay. There we are. And the bottom I know it's going to hit. I just want to make sure the top hits as well. Okay, great. That does the job. Now we can hide away the hitbox. I'm going to make it back to transparent, and then I'm going to comment there, bring it to front bit out as well, so you can just stay in the background. There we are. So now we should be able to see the big eyes and hear the sound as well. So I think this has been the new tutorial on the T-Rex endless running game. I hope this was helpful for you. If you find it useful or anything like that, please make sure to leave a like and a subscribe, and please leave me a comment if you have any issues with it. I think that's it for now, really. Thank you for sticking around to the end, and I will see you on the next tutorial.